You're listening to The Globalists, first broadcast on the 3rd of January 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Hello, this is The Globalist, broadcasting to you live from Midori House in London. I'm Georgina Godwin. On the show ahead...
Mr. How are the conversations going?
What you need right now? Will you have the votes tomorrow?
Meetings are going well, and I think tomorrow's going to go smoothly.
The Speaker of the US House of Representatives is due to be elected today. We'll ask if Mike Johnson can retain the position and what this means for the certification of the election results. Then, China's economy has weakened in the past few years. Will 2025 bring a reversal of fortune? We'll have analysis of Xi Jinping's New Year address. We'll have a roundup of aviation news, including the latest on investigations over the South Korean air crash on Sunday. And we'll have a look through the newspaper front pages. And finally, evidence of a huge dinosaur roaming rural Oxfordshire in Britain has been found. We'll speak to one of the paleontologists involved in the discovery. That's all ahead here on The Globalist, live from London. First, a look at what else is happening in the news. Israeli airstrikes killed at least 68 Palestinians across the Gaza Strip on Thursday, including the head of the enclave's Hamas-controlled police force, his deputy, and 9 displaced people. That's according to Gaza authorities. Authorities have failed to arrest impeached South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol after they were confronted by presidential security forces when they tried to enter his compound. And thick smog has engulfed the Indian capital, New Delhi, today, prompting warnings of possible flight disruptions from airport and airline officials, as worsening air quality cut visibility to zero in some areas. Do stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on those stories. Now, the US House of Representatives votes today for a Speaker of the House to lead the chamber for the next 2 years under the incoming Republican administration. It's a position that's previously been beset with infighting amongst the GOP. Kevin McCarthy was ousted as Speaker by his Republican colleagues in October 2023, and it took lawmakers several weeks to finally elect their next leader, Mike Johnson, who's running to retain his position in the next Congress. But he hasn't yet received support from all of his Republican colleagues, though he appears to have the backing of President-elect Donald Trump. Well, I'm joined now by Simon Marks, a Washington reporter. Simon, many thanks for coming on the show. Why does this vote carry particularly intense pressure?
Well, I think because, of course, first of all, Mike Johnson, as Speaker of the House of Representatives, would be third in line for the American presidency. So the selection of any Speaker is always fraught with infighting among the party that is going to place him behind the Speaker's chair, give him the Speaker's gavel. But particularly because the Republican caucus in the House of Representatives is so restive. There's so much infighting within that Republican caucus. And the Republican majority in this new House of Representatives is so narrow that Mike Johnson can only afford to lose the support of 2 Republicans if he's going to avoid a date with destiny very similar to Kevin McCarthy's experience when he was ousted from the speakership. Now, it does look like he's going to squeak through. That is certainly what Mike Johnson is expecting, because at the moment we can only see one Republican who is definitely planning to vote against him, a right-wing congressman by the name of Thomas Massie from Kentucky. On social media, he has argued, and I quote, "For months, Democrats ignored the fact that Joe Biden was a potato. They convinced themselves that keeping him around was the pragmatic way to win the day. Too late did they admit the emperor had no clothes. Republicans," he argued, "are doing the same thing by keeping Speaker Mike Johnson." And there are many other Republicans who previously have accused Mike Johnson of betraying core right-wing principles by backing Speaker spending bills that spend far too much money. They accuse him of allowing $60 billion in assistance to have been ferried to Ukraine, all the things they oppose. So they really have, many of them, an ideological problem with him. But at the moment, Thomas Massie looks like he may be the only Republican that decides to withhold support, but it's going to be a knife edge. There's no question about that.
I wonder if we're likely to see any other candidates besides Johnson come forward, because in the past, alternatives have been floated during the day of the vote.
Well, and alternatives have been floated in the last few days, and they include Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, the co-chairs of Donald Trump's newly created Department of Government Efficiency. Remember, to be Speaker of the House of Representatives, you do not have to be an elected member of the House of Representatives. I mean, there are other figures out there that might be more pleasing to those people who ideologically would like to see a tougher, more zealous member of the Republican caucus holding the Speaker's gavel. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Republican congresswoman from Georgia, her name is occasionally floated. But Donald Trump moved last week to try and shut all this down and firmly and clearly endorsed Mike Johnson in social media postings. Mike Johnson has made numerous visits over the festive season and in the run-up to it to Mar-a-Lago, the president-elect's transition headquarters. I think Donald Trump is hoping he's done enough to shut the door on this particular uprising. The difficulty is that it is a proxy for the relationship that Donald Trump is going to have to forge with Republicans in the House of Representatives going forward. If he wants to get his agenda implemented, he's going to need fulsome support from Republicans in the House, and some of them, as we've seen, are already making it absolutely clear that they are their own man and their own woman.
Let's just have a look at Elon Musk for a moment, because he has given Johnson his full support. How serious is the kind of floating of his name for the position?
Well, I think it might be wishful thinking on the part of some Republicans in the House of Representatives. There is no evidence that Elon Musk wants to give up the day job and find himself, overseeing parliamentary procedure or trying to herd cats in the Republican caucus for the next 2 years. And it's also not evident at all, by the way, that Elon Musk is ideologically aligned with most of these people. I mean, the position that he's staked out over the festive season on immigration and his view that immigration is an important aspect of American life, particularly as far as skilled workers are concerned working in the tech industry, puts him diametrically opposed to the viewpoint of many of the Republicans that under normal circumstances might not back Mike Johnson for this position. So it's hard to see it happening, but mostly hard to see it's happening because would Elon Musk really agree to divest himself of his business interests in order to take this position and literally give up the day job? On the other hand, he spent an inordinate amount of time adhering himself to Donald Trump like a barnacle ever since election night. And it's hard to know precisely what kind of role he's going to play in Washington after the inauguration on January the 20th.
So could this House race affect the certification of the election? I mean, no business can be done until we've got the Speaker in place.
Well, I think that's unlikely this time around. You're correct. I mean, this is not just the Speaker's election today. It's the arrival of the new House of Representatives, the new Congress being sworn in, arising out of last November's election. Remember, the country didn't just vote for the president, it voted for a third of the Senate and the entire House of Representatives. Now, given that Donald Trump is not on this occasion articulating any anxiety or concerns about the strength of America's election system, it seems pretty likely that Republicans will aggressively move to certify the results of the elections last November. And remember, Donald Trump thinks he's in a powerful position here because the entire House of Representatives was up for grabs last November, and he will argue that it was his coattails that brought many Republicans over the finishing line, and that they owe him a bit of a debt of gratitude for the strength of his presidential campaign. So I think the certification of the election results will take place as usual, if one can still use that phrase about Washington, D.C. But more broadly, there's going to be major tussles ahead between the White House and Republicans on Capitol Hill, particularly those in the House.
Simon, thank you very much indeed. That was Simon Marks there, and this is The Globalist. It is 15:10 in Beijing, 7:10 here in London. China watchers have been analysing President Xi Jinping's New Year's address, during which he projected confidence about the country's economic outlook and also repeated threats about taking over Taiwan. Well, I'm joined now by Isabel Hilton, founder of China Dialogue and a visiting professor at King's College London's Lowy Institute. Isabel, welcome back to the show. She seemed very bullish on the economy, but how realistic is this attitude? What is China currently grappling with in that sphere?
Well, yes, he was making very positive noises about the economy, but that has rather been a trend. I think the Chinese officials who have been talking up the economy for the past 9 or 10 months have really been doing it to try to instill confidence. And what they're failing to do is getting people to spend because, as indeed he acknowledged in the speech, people are hurting. Not everybody. He may feel that the economy is on an upward trend, but certainly most people don't feel that. They are very worried. A huge amount of value has been destroyed in the property crash. The stock market is way down. And there are many reasons why people are hanging on to their cash and not making the transition to a consumer economy that China needs. So there's a lot of, brave talk, but not supported at all by the statistics and the figures and the projections.
I mean, I see that the FT today is reporting that the People's Bank of China plans to cut interest rates and make a shift to a more orthodox monetary policy, more in line with its Western counterparts. I wonder if that's going to make a big difference.
Well, we'll see. I mean, we've tried all manner of things. We've tried, mini stimuli. We've tried persuading local authorities to take over some of these excess properties to try to do something with them. But local authorities themselves are very cash-strapped. And the fact is that most of China's growth for the previous 10 years came from borrowing money and building. And that bubble has burst. And until they can find a new driver of the economy, these measures may help at the margins, but there is still a fundamental problem of where the next round of growth is coming from.
What did she say about Taiwan?
Well, he repeated, his confidence that it was, I think he said, historically inevitable that Taiwan would, as he put it, be reunited with the mainland. And he talked a lot about Taiwanese people and Chinese people being one people. Now, I'm not sure how many people in China feel that. Certainly on Taiwan, they do not feel that. And there's been a tremendous growth in a sense of Taiwanese identity over the past 20 years. And only about 4% of Taiwanese now say that they are Chinese rather than Taiwanese. So the one people message, again, is, it's an assertion by Xi Jinping, not supported by the facts. And we've seen an unprecedented level of military activity around Taiwan in the past year. Exercises in sort of slow strangulation, undermining confidence in Taiwan, very much the kind of the fist in the not very convincing velvet glove. So it's if the Taiwanese people really wanted to be united with the mainland, they would have voted differently in the last presidential elections.
Donald Trump, the incoming US president, has questioned whether America would come to Taiwan's aid in any invasion scenario. I mean, do you think this is a major factor in emboldening China?
Well, I think it's certainly an opportunity for China. I mean, Donald Trump creates opportunities for America's enemies with almost every time he opens his mouth. And, to say that, to cast doubt on the idea of the US defense of Taiwan is an open invitation. I don't think it's going to be taken up in the form of a full-scale invasion in the near future, because that remains rather a high-risk strategy. But it's an invitation to do almost what Russia did in Crimea, to seize a small island off the coast, for example. Taiwan is, after all, an archipelago with many islands, and some of them are only 4 kilometers off the coast of the mainland. So, there are lots of opportunities for rattling the cage, if you like. And if the United States is going to sit on its hands and say, we're not going to do anything we're not paid to do, which is pretty much Trump's attitude to alliances, then it's a pretty open door for Xi Jinping.
And finally, Isabel, what were the other main takeaways from the speech?
There was a lot of emphasis on social welfare. He stressed that he understood that that all families wanted their elderly to be taken care of. They wanted opportunities for their children and so on. And these are really indications that they're quite worried about the way people are feeling about the economy. There's a lot of discontent, there's a lot of anxiety, and I think that the party is always concerned about its legitimacy, and that's really performance legitimacy. So if it's not delivering for people, and there's a massive inequality in wealth and slow growth and the kind of fears that we've been talking about, he gave a lot of attention to that. At the same time, he was saying, look, China's great in the world, it's respected, it's leading the third world, we're making a new world. But actually, at home, people are not feeling those benefits. And I think that was pretty evident in the stress of the speeches.
Isabel, thank you very much indeed. That's Isabel Hilton there. Now, still to come on the programme. So that's apparently the sound of a megalosaurus, though how anyone can verify it is a mystery to me. We'll hear about the exciting discovery of the largest dinosaur footprint to be found in the UK. This is The Globalist.
UBS is a global financial services firm with over 150 years of heritage. Built on the unique dedication of our people, we bring fresh thinking and perspective to our work. We know that it takes a marriage of intelligence and heart to create lasting value for our clients. It's about having the right ideas, of course, but also about having one of the most accomplished systems and an unrivaled network of global experts. That's why at UBS, we pride ourselves on thinking smarter to make a real difference. Tune in to The Bulletin with UBS every week for the latest insights and opinions from UBS all around the world.
This is The Globalist on Monocle Radio with me, Georgina Godwin, and it's time to have a look at the newspapers now. I'm very pleased to welcome back to the studio my friend Yasmin Abdel Majid, who's the Sudanese-Australian broadcaster and author. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year, Georgina. Thanks for having me back.
Do you know what a dinosaur sounds like?
Look, it sounded like my stomach grumbling, but like a sort of extra version of that. It is always curious, right? Yeah.
I mean, how would we possibly work it out? I suppose you could look at their vocal... Do we have examples
I have. Do you know, I remember seeing this image once of a rabbit's skeleton and being like, a rabbit looks quite different to what its skeleton looks like. So even though we think dinosaurs look this one way based on the skeleton, they could actually look completely different. And I kind of like the idea that even though we've got some remains, they actually are still mysterious to us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting ahead of myself. These are questions for our paleontologist a little bit later on. But for you, I just wanted, before we go into the papers, know what Slovenia was like.
Yeah, so that was my husband and I went through Slovenia on a train and bus trip over the Christmas break, and it was actually stunning. I had no kind of concept. I mean, my only understanding of Slovenia was related to Yugoslavia, really, but I had no sense that in such a small country they had mountains and lakes and beaches and some of the best, most beautiful sunsets I've ever seen. So I recommend from that point of view.
Sounds wonderful. To the news now, and of course many papers picking up on the fact that it's been the highest death toll in weeks in Gaza. Tell us more.
Yes, Georgina, it's unfortunate that we at the beginning of 2025 and the news is still about more airstrikes in Gaza. So today we've got reports that Israeli airstrikes have killed at least 68 Palestinians across the Gaza Strip, including killing the head of police. And the target was also an area, Al-Masawi district, which was designated as a humanitarian safe zone for citizens earlier in the war. So we're seeing that despite the fact that we are well into the second year of this war, strikes do continue, and every day, obviously, every day without a ceasefire will bring more tragedy. And so the death toll does continue.
To South Korea now, and this just gets weirder and weirder. So they attempted to arrest the South Korean president, Yoon Suk-yeol, but didn't manage it.
Yeah, I thought this was fascinating. And the more I learn about it, the more I'm sort of appreciating the trend that we're seeing around the world, with the election of Donald Trump, etc., is playing out in lots of different ways across the globe. So with South Korea, there was the president, the impeached president, Yoon Suk-yeol, was meant to be arrested. And this would have been the first time any sitting South Korean president would have been arrested. But unfortunately, they weren't able to arrest him. And so anti-corruption forces sort of attempted to get into his residence, but weren't able to because there was a standoff. And so concern for the safety of personnel on site led to the decision to halt the execution of the warrants. That was the Corruption Investigation Office in a statement. And whether or not they'll actually attempt again is up for, it's still a question, because I think the warrant runs out on Monday. So they may attempt again to do so over the weekend. But interestingly, the residence was surrounded by pro-Yoon protesters, and the other interesting thing was they had, the South Korean flag and the United States flag, right? And there were reports of his supporters essentially looking forward to the arrival of Donald Trump in the presidency and looking forward to Trump sort of supporting Yoon, and you're starting to see that the arrival of Donald Trump, especially given the sort of background of how Yoon has come to power and the strong sort of evangelical foundation of his party, the sort of Christian evangelical foundation of his party, may mean that when come January 20 and past, the situation for Yoon will look very different.
Absolutely. Let's have a look at West Africa now, particularly Ivory Coast, because they announced this week that French troops will begin withdrawing this month. Now, this is part of a shift towards strengthening their own military forces. They are not alone, though. Many other countries in West Africa are doing the same.
Yes, so this is a piece in France 24 that highlighted the fact that actually what we're seeing across West Africa is the decline of influence of France. So obviously France was the major colonial power in this region, but there've been, so within the last year or two, you've had a number of military coups, and associated with those military coups was French withdrawal. So from Mali, from Burkina Faso, and from Niger in 2022 and 2023. And also you've seen the Central African Republic, French troops left in 22. And you've seen, the list continues, French withdrawing jets and troops from Chad at the end of last year. And Senegal has also made a similar request. And so, we're seeing across West Africa, it's a combination of two different things. One, you've got in the case of military coups like Mali and Burkina Faso, it's a more ideological bent. We no longer want to have, the colonial power in the region, in our country at all. And they're actually moving towards Russia and the Wagner Group and so on. With Senegal and the Ivory Coast, it's less kind of we want to cut ties completely, but it is, it is time for us now to stand on our own 2 feet. And so that shift is really, it's in full swing.
Now, we're reporting in our headlines today about very, very thick smog in New Delhi. And of course, this is to do with air pollution. Norway, however, is going great guns with this. They have nearly all new cars sold in 2024 were fully electric.
That's right. Not hybrid, but completely electric. 9 out of 10 new cars sold in Norway last year were powered by battery only. And it places the country within reach of its target of only adding cars that are electric on the road by 2025. And so we're looking at, and also Norway's interesting because it is a huge oil and gas giant, right? So this is not a country that has been renewable forever. However, they've sort of had a combination of a carrot and stick approach. They had high taxes on petrol and diesel cars while also exempting EVs from import and value-added taxes and so on to make them sort of more attractive. And they've included infrastructure to, fast charging at petrol stations, these sorts of things. And so, Norway may be the first country where you sort of have all new cars fully electric, but also the majority of the cars on the street being at least hybrid or electric. The thing that I thought was interesting in this piece was that the challenge is actually rental cars, because tourists and so on are the ones who are least familiar with electric cars. And so the rental companies are still buying mostly petrol and diesel cars. But it shows that it is possible despite the fact that you might be a country benefiting from oil and gas. The one kind of caveat they said is they've never produced cars. And so they don't have an auto-making lobby or anything like that. But it's some positive news in this world.
Absolutely, and thank you for that, Yasmin. That's Yasmin Abdel-Majid there. Now, here's what else we're keeping an eye on today. Israeli airstrikes killed at least 68 Palestinians across the Gaza Strip on Thursday, including at a tented camp where the head of the enclave's Hamas-controlled police force, his deputy and 9 displaced people died, Gaza authorities said. Israel said the deputy was head of the Palestinian military group Hamas's security forces in southern Gaza. Authorities entered impeached South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol's compound today to attempt to execute an unprecedented arrest warrant, evading a crowd of protesters outside, but were confronted with presidential security forces within. There was an hours-long standoff between officers and the presidential security team, and the police have now suspended the arrest attempt and have withdrawn to review the situation. And thick smog engulfed the Indian capital New Delhi today, prompting warnings of possible flight disruptions from airport and airline officials, as worsening air quality cut visibility to zero in some areas. Delhi, which has been battling smog and poor air quality since the beginning of winter, ranked third among the world's most polluted capitals in today's live rankings by Swiss group IQ Air. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. It's 7:26 here in London, and joining me in the studio is aviation analyst Sally Gethin. Good morning to you, Sally.
Good morning.
We're going to pick up on this South Korean crash, which of course happened last Sunday, and investigations are continuing. What is the latest on this?
So the latest on this is that the authorities are lifting the fuselage, a bulky part of the wreckage today, and of course hoping to discover more from this stage. And also they're conducting checks on 101 of the other countries' airlines, Boeing 737-800s. So it was that aircraft type that was in this incident. So as a precaution, they're doing that to check there aren't any issues, for example, with the landing gear, which didn't deploy at all on this latest incident, and which was a major factor in the crash itself.
Well, let's continue talking about Boeing, because, of course, it's easy to think that there's always been a duopoly and that Boeing has always been one of the huge aircraft manufacturers and, in fact, always will be. That's looking less and less likely. Tell us about the domination of large commercial aircraft market by 2 companies and how that's being shaken up.
What we've seen really in recent decades up to the present day is this domination of this duopoly, Airbus and Boeing. It wasn't always like that. In a way, it's been quite insidious because they have swallowed up or managed to deter major competitors, and that's how they've risen into this position. The dilemma now, though, for the air travel industry is there simply aren't enough airplanes being produced to meet demand. And there's a projection of a demand for 44,000 new airplanes in the foreseeable future, ultimately. So there is scope for another contender, and all eyes are on Embraer, which is based in Brazil. This is what's termed a feisty aircraft manufacturer. They're very innovative. They don't have the supply chain issues that Boeing and Airbus have. Having said that, they're still relatively niche, and their airplanes only reach up to 146 passenger capacity. So to bring out a large new aircraft to twin aisle, they would need a lot more investment. This is speculated possibly it might come from the Gulf region, where there's more capital available. But it certainly would be exciting if that happened. And it doesn't need to be Embraer. It could be another contender. There are plenty of contenders out there. So yeah, there is this possibility. But the trouble is the industry is not going to change anytime soon. It does take a lot of time for traction to build up, and also to get a new prototype on the drawing boards in the first place.
Let's have a look at Aeromexico. Now, that's not a company that we often speak about, but in fact, they've been named the most on-time global airline in 2024.
Yeah, so this league table of on-time performance, which means any aircraft that arrives within 15 minutes of its scheduled time at the gate or departs within 15 minutes, is classed as being on time. And Cirium, a respected consultancy, has produced this league table. And yes, surprisingly, how niche is that? Aeromexico has topped the global airline league tables. I mean, having said that, the league tables do break down by region. So, for example, Delta Airlines, a giant in the sky, so to speak, has come out top in North America. But it's very interesting that these regional niche carriers like Aeromexico are doing so well in efficiency. And Iberia, the Iberia Express brand, is also doing very well in Europe as well, has come out on top. We see some very surprising developments there. And it just goes to show that size doesn't always matter, that these smaller airlines can improve their worth and, demonstrate efficiency as much as the larger airlines.
Sally, thank you very much indeed. That's Sally Gethin there. And this is Monocle Radio. It's 8:31 in Zurich, 7:31 here in London. Now, the largest dinosaur footprint in Britain has been found in a quarry in Oxfordshire. Kirsty Edgar is a professor of micropaleontology at the University of Birmingham, and she was co-lead on the research for the dig that made the discovery. And she joins us on the line now. Kirsty, it's really wonderful to have you with us. Can you tell us exactly what's been found?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So last summer, or actually the story starts in 2023, when one of the quarry workers in this limestone quarry was driving his digger over the floor and extracting some clay, and he kept hitting bumps. This is Gary Johnson from Smith's Bletchington. And he recognised, because they were in a really ordered manner and occurring every sort of 3 metres, that actually they could be dinosaur tracks, as there was a history in the area. So the quarry contacted the Oxford University Museum of Natural History, and then myself and my colleague Richard Butler from the University of Birmingham became involved as we studied dinosaur tracks. And we organised a large-scale excavation because when we viewed the site, we recognised how exciting it was. And over the course of a week last summer, with the help of over 100 volunteers from both the universities and the museum, we excavated more than 200 dinosaur tracks in the week. And these are some of the largest individual tracks, but also the largest trackways that have ever been discovered in the UK. So some of these trackways extend over 150 metres.
That's extraordinary. So how important is this discovery, and what does it tell us about the dinosaur population in Britain?
So dinosaur tracks are really important because they tell us information that we can't get from the body fossil record. So from these, we can figure out things like how big the organism was. We can figure out how fast it was moving. We can think about things about how it was interacting with its environment and other animals that were in the area. What we know from this site in Oxfordshire is that about 166 million years ago, Oxfordshire was a subtropical environment. This particular quarry was on the edge of a series of coastal lagoons. So the dinosaurs would have been walking along the edge of these lagoons and across carbonate mudflats. So think today's Florida Keys. We discovered 5 extensive trackways. One of those was from the fearsome predator Megalosaurus. So think the UK's version of a T-Rex, about 9 meters, in length and about 2 tons. And that was sort of walking along, and we have about 50 of those tracks. Each track is about 70 centimetres in length. And then we have 4 massive trackways up to 150 metres in length from sauropods, so herbivorous dinosaurs, long-necked, 4 legs. And these similarly were probably around 18 metres in length. There was a bit of a variability between individuals, but the largest was probably about 18 metres, weighing more than 10 tonnes. And perhaps something like Cetiosaurus that we find throughout the UK.
So a little bit earlier, we played the sound of a Megalosaurus. Can anybody possibly say what dinosaurs sounded like?
That's a really good question. I think a lot of people were working on trying to reconstruct that, but it's really hard because we often only have the hard body parts preserved. And of course, a lot of what's going on with the vocalization is preserved in the soft body parts. But yeah, I think people can have a good guess now.
Finally, will you just tell us about being involved with the project and if it's continuing, if more discoveries are likely, and what it felt like being at the forefront of this wonderful discovery?
Oh, I mean, it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. You get to stand in this massive area that's crisscrossed by dinosaur tracks. It's the largest in the UK. It's one of the largest in the world. And you're just standing in this spot where these, some of the largest animals ever on Earth once were. I think it's a phenomenal feeling, and I'm sort of a real privilege to be involved. In terms of the future, it is an ongoing active quarry site. So we're working with Smiths Bletchington, the quarry owners who've been exceptionally supportive in this work, and Natural England to really talk about what the future of the site could be, because there's no public access at the moment because it is active quarrying. But also the quarrying that's continuing means that there is the possibility that we might find even more at this site. So really exciting potential as well as what's already been found.
Fabulous. Kirsty, thank you very much indeed. That was Kirsty Edgar, a professor in micropaleontology at the University of Birmingham. And that's all for today's programme. Thanks to our producers Anita Riotta and Monica Lillis, our researcher Gunnar Grinlid, and our studio manager Lily Allen. After the headlines, there's more music on the way, and The Briefing is live at midday in London, and The Globalist will return at the same time on Monday. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thank you for listening.